Let me welcome Attorney Jean-Louis Kelly with us this morning. Thank you so much for your patience. Thank you for being here.
Morning, Rennie. Thank you for having me, as always.
It is great to see you again and making her ruling. The justice said torrential rain and flooding on the 7th of September 2015 may have impelled the EBC to issue the directive, which they did. Nonetheless, the uncontrollable weather conditions did not confer on the EBC the power to direct that the law be broken. I think that is called a scolding. Anyway, it's an interpretation, and before we go into the other parts of it, does this put an end to the question of the power of the EBC, or the EBC will raise this as a separate matter? Because many people thought these were two separate issues. But the judge in the ruling here, made it very clear that the EBC acted illegally, so one can say a ruling was made on the EBC. What is your reading of the judgment handed down?
Yes, you're correct. It does deal with the EBC's powers to an extent, unless it is the Election and Boundaries Commission decides to appeal the decision as well. But the question was in relation to the powers of the EBC and the returning officer. They had a constitutional power and then powers given to them under the Representation of the People's Act, whereby rules were prescribed, election rules. And the judge held specifically in relation to the rule dealing with the elections taking place from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. So what she in effect said on an interpretation is that the EBC has the power, and it's a creature of statute, to be given power by what is given in the legislation. So it can't just go out of the legislation on its own.
Gotcha.
Right? So that's why she held
regardless of how
illegality.
compelling the circumstances may be, there is a parameter that you cannot step out of.
That's correct.
I like what she said. She said she strove to hold the balance to protect the will of the majority while ensuring that the pattern mistakes have not reduced the elections of 2015 to a mere sham. She concluded by saying, "It does not appear to me that the breaches affected the result. It is therefore my view, and I hold that the petition should be and is hereby dismissed."
Correct. Now, as just a little addendum, I believe on the last occasion when I was here, the section that she referred to is Section 35.
Yes.
Section 35 of the Representation of the People's Act says that the election must take place in accordance with the election rules. But it goes on and says that the RO must do all things to effectively carry out the elections in accordance with the rules. But the third part is, no election will be held to be invalid with any decision taken by the returning officer or their agents, pretty much, unless it can be shown to the court that the question, I can actually read it out. No election is invalid by reasons of an act by the RO or other person in breach of his official duty in connection with the election or otherwise on the election rules, if it appears to the court, having cognizance of the question, that the act did not materially affect the results of the election.
Which is exactly what the judge is saying here.
Correct. In what you just read, that's exactly what she
The opposition leader, Mrs. Kamala Bissessar, says she feels vindicated, but that is another issue. Unless she means that the declaration by the judge that the EBC acted illegally, is that the area where she would make the statement, "I feel vindicated"? Because the petition was dismissed, and the admonishment or interpretation of the guidelines for the EBC, that was made clear. So I don't know which one. I shouldn't put you in the mind of the former Prime Minister, should I?
I can't be in the mind of.
All right. But they are going to appeal.
They are going to appeal, right?
How far can this appeal go?
They've made the intention that they will appeal. This appeal can only go as far as the Court of Appeal.
Only as far as the court.
That's correct.
Why is that?
Section 155 of the Representation of the People's Act lays out quite clearly that the Court of Appeal shall be the final court in relation to matters of election petitions. And it deals with the final courts in specific areas of the Act, one of them being Part 6 of the Act. Part 6 deals with legal proceedings on an election petition. So therefore, once the Court of Appeal, if they go the route of the Court of Appeal, which they've indicated, once the Court of Appeal gives its final determination, it ends there. This is not a matter which goes to the Privy Council.
Attorney John Louis Kelly is my guest inside Brunch. I am always struck when I hear someone taking something to court who is paying for it. I'm also struck when I hear an appeal who is paying for it. In the case of the petitions carried to the courts, the one that the judge just dismissed, who pays for that?
Right. Now, I must say I haven't read the actual 53-page judgment. I've only gotten what has been reported in the press. But from the reports, it appears that the judge has ruled that the UNC has to pay the PNM's cost. But as regards the EBC, that they're making no orders to cost, meaning each party would bear their own cost.
I see. And in the case of an appeal, and should the appeal should there be consistency between this ruling and an appeal? Who's going to pay for that?
Right. Well, this being part of civil proceedings, we are actually governed in the profession by the Civil Proceedings Rules, 1998, as amended from time to time. And the Part 66, Rule 66.6, lays out the general rule of costs. And the general rule is that a successful party will be entitled to costs. However, the court has a power to award costs based on the situation at hand and the actual occurrence of the case. So what they look at is several factors, which include the conduct of the parties, whether the parties brought a particular issue, whether it was reasonable to bring that issue, whether it was that whether the conduct of the parties caused. So if a claimant brings a case, whether it caused somebody to have to defend the action because of an unreasonable case being brought, and whether you gave the person reasonable notice. Now, in these proceedings, I don't think the reasonable notice would be an issue because the length of time you only had a 7-day period or whatever to bring the actual petition. But in relation, what they have to look at was whether this is a novel issue and several other factors. So that's why I'm of the understanding and seeing that the PNM's cost would have been awarded because they had to defend this action and they would have won in essence because by the ruling that the UNC's matter, the petitions are being dismissed, that meant that the PNM, the people, Faris Al-Rawi and the other ministers, the other members of parliament would have won their respective cases. So they were awarded costs because they would have had to pay their attorneys to represent their interest.
We got you 10 minutes away from the top of the hour. The elections of 2015, almost a year ago, it took for us to get to this point. An appeal likely will take a very long time, you believe?
Well,
I mean, you know.
generally appeals will take some time, but I'm pretty sure if this has to be heard on an appeal, as we'll note from the last couple appeals they had in this same matter, they will treat it as a priority issue. So I'm sure it may take at most a few months.
Okay, because I thought someone challenging the results of the election was an urgent matter, and if it took a year, I paid close attention when you say when attorneys speak, you've got to pay real close attention. When you say that they have indicated they may, they're not saying that they are, correct, in fact, going to. Maybe looking at that factor, the fact that this could take a very long time, a couple of months, which puts the current government almost in the middle of their term. If an appeal takes another year, it may not even be profitable to go through with this.
Just to bear in mind though, I know that we have 14 days to take the appeal. The UNC has 14 days to take the appeal. Now, what I would want to bear in mind is I know it's almost a year, but we've been subject to 2 or 3 appeals in this very matter, going up to the Court of Appeal and then having to come back down. So it's not just that it took a year for the decision to come, in fairness. It took a year for the decision, bearing in mind several appeals were made to the Court of Appeal in relation to this very matter.
I don't know if I should put you in this in the lane of this or allow you just to stay in your crease, to use the cricket analogy, because it begs of me something that, I mean, I understand the ruling, but I always believe that common sense must accompany legislation. Now, if there is agreement that the inclement weather prevented a lot of people from going to the polls, and the EBC, because this is what's confusing to me, the EBC, I believe in their good faith, meant to accommodate all those who were denied, because their responsibility is to ensure that every citizen has the right to vote. Yeah. And they see conditions where there were floods, where representation was made by the opposition and the ruling party, and they decided, listen, in order to facilitate the citizenry as a whole, we will extend this. I do not personally find that that egregious. I mean, and while it is good to say it did not affect the outcome of it, I am saying that if you were given the responsibility to ensure that people have the chance to exercise their right, then you should be able to make such a judgment call.
Right. Well, that then comes down to the same thing as the rules. So in order for it to fall into place, the rules will need to be amended. The lawmakers will have to make those amendments. But coming on from the other point that you did mention there, and as I said, it's just from my reading of the reports in the press. There's been mention of the judge didn't mention in relation to the other side. What she said was that there was no wrongful acts done by the EBC. The common man would have interpreted it that all things were flowing normal and everything. She even, I think, went as far as to mention that she's not going to be dealing with speculation as to who had a right because no evidence was led. And even in that regard, she did mention that the both parties had their artillery, so to speak, on election day. And even the PNM made the decision as well not to proceed when the decision was made because it was a rather last-minute decision because of the inclement weather around 5 o'clock that they were extending it to 7. So, bearing in mind all the evidence she had before her, she came to the decision that there was nothing which showed that it would materially affect the outcome of the elections. And that's why the matter was dismissed.
Making it very clear because, legalese is something else. The pattern mistakes, the clear mistakes that were made here. So she is holding out that the EBC did something they were not supposed to do.
Correct, by extending past 6 p.m.
Right, it's not always good intentions, it's what the law says.
Correct.
Always had a problem with that. It must be, everything must be tempered.
And ignorance is not an excuse.
Yeah, I know. But everything must be tempered by reasonableness, I mean, really. Because really, what allowed this to be dismissed is the fact that the counsel for the PNM made representation. He said, even if I give all the votes after 6 o'clock to the opposition, the PNM still won these seats. And I think that's essentially what the judge said. It did not materially change anything. Let's see, it was not enough to invalidate the results, say exact words.
Correct. And the UNC, the QC they had argued to the extent of saying that there was certain illegalities which led to corrupt practices by the EBC, and the judge did not hold that there was any corrupt practices. She actually had it from the evidence before her, there was a free and fair election to the common man. So it's on those principles, right? Both in mind.
Okay, onwards now to wait and see if there is an appeal and see what we know what the appeal would be. I'm interested in finding out what will be done. I'm not asking you to comment on this, but I'm interested in seeing what happens because, I mean, rain, inclement weather is a reality.
Correct.
It can happen. Citizens being deprived, I believe, or not being deprived must be the priority. If that is the priority, I wonder if amendments will be done to allow the Election and Boundaries Commission after consultation with the contending parties to give them that power to do something like that, because that to be made the world of sense.
Correct.
And this is not a legal thing. Just as a citizen, you go like, yeah, it's stuff outside. People can't get there. I mean, there were floods. People just couldn't get there.
Correct.
And it was not limited to just one constituency. It was across the board.
Correct. And that's why I'm saying I can't fault the judge because she did state in the judgment that, bearing in mind all of that, you're still not a law unto yourself. So you can't do something which the law does not prescribe you to do.
No, I was not. I agree. I was not on with the judge at all. I was just on with the piece of legislation itself. The flexibility that it should be, but that's a whole different talk show. Attorney Jean-Louis Kelly, thank you for taking your time to coming in with us this Sunday morning. Do you really believe there will be an appeal, though?
Well, they said they will.
Yeah, well, they may. I guess so. Thank you so much for coming in, man. Have yourself a nice week, okay?
You as well.
Thank you so much.